In October 2015, a single Wall Street Journal investigation by reporter John Carreyrou began unraveling what Silicon Valley had called the greatest medical breakthrough of the 21st century. Elizabeth Holmes, a 31-year-old Stanford dropout worth a reported $9 billion, had convinced the world she could run more than 200 medical tests from a single drop of blood using a device called the Edison. What investigators discovered inside Theranos laboratories was devastating. The Edison machine could not perform most of the tests it claimed, and patient blood samples were secretly being run on competitors' equipment. Elizabeth Holmes didn't just promise a revolution, she looked the part. At just 19, she walked away from Stanford, trading textbooks for black turtlenecks and a minimalist uniform that echoed her idol, Steve Jobs. Her voice dropped to a low monotone in interviews. Her office walls were lined with photos of Jobs, and her public image was sculpted with help from the same ad agency behind Apple's campaigns. The message was clear. This was the next great Silicon Valley visionary, and she was here to change the world. But it wasn't just style that drew people in. By September 2015, Forbes crowned her the world's self-made youngest female billionaire, plastering her on the cover with a headline valuation of $9 billion and assigning her a personal net worth of $3.6 billion. The press called her a genius. Investors, politicians, and media outlets scrambled for access. Behind Holmes stood a board that read like the guest list for a state dinner. There was former Secretary of State George Shultz, retired General James Mattis, and media titan Rupert Murdoch. Their resumes spanned diplomacy, defense, and global media, but not one of them was a practicing physician or a laboratory scientist. Their presence gave Theranos the gold-plated veneer of legitimacy, a wall of social proof that discouraged tough questions. In pitch decks and press releases, these names did more than open doors. They closed mouths. The world saw a founder who looked like Steve Jobs, a board stacked with power, and a company anointed by Forbes as the next great American success. Few dared to doubt what was hiding beneath the surface. Theranos' promise sounded like science fiction, more than 200 blood tests from a single drop, delivered quickly and painlessly. The Edison device was supposed to be a revolution, but inside the company's own labs, the numbers told a different story. Internal validation reports showed that out of more than 200 assays advertised, only 10 could consistently meet FDA precision standards. The rest failed accuracy checks or produced results that drifted so far from accepted medical limits, they were useless for diagnosis. Despite the bold claims, in-house logs revealed that less than 5% of patient samples were ever processed on the Edison. Most tests were quietly run on Siemens analyzers, machines Theranos bought off the shelf and then hid behind closed doors. The engineering team, bound by secrecy, watched as their own data was ignored. Instead of fixing the science, the company doubled down on the marketing. The gap between what was promised and what was delivered grew wider every day. Patients and doctors believed they were getting cutting-edge diagnostics, but in reality, most results came from technology Theranos never invented. The illusion of progress was maintained by careful omission, selective data, and a relentless focus on image over evidence. The truth, buried in lab logs and rejected samples, was that the Edison could not do what Holmes said it could. Every false promise set the stage for harm that would soon become impossible to ignore. Theranos did not just hide its failures, it manufactured evidence to convince the world it had succeeded. In pitch decks sent to investors, a letter on Pfizer's official letterhead appeared, a glowing endorsement of the Edison device, supposedly signed by a top Pfizer executive. The letter claimed Pfizer had independently validated Theranos' technology and found it ready for clinical use. But the signature was a forgery, and the letterhead was doctored. Pfizer later confirmed no such document existed in its archives, and no employee had ever signed off on the Edison. Still, the fake letter was waved before investors and partners as proof that Theranos had the backing of one of the world's most trusted pharmaceutical companies. The deception did not stop at paperwork. Theranos press releases claimed that Edison was already saving lives on the front lines, and that it had been deployed by the United States military in Afghanistan. That claim, repeated in interviews and investor meetings, had no basis in fact. Department of Defense records show 0 contracts, 0 purchases, and no evidence the device ever left Palo Alto. Internal emails later revealed this battlefield story was crafted by the company's communications team to add a heroic sheen to the narrative. When outsiders asked for technical data, they hit a wall of secrecy. Employees were told to cite trade secrets and to demand non-disclosure agreements before sharing even basic information. This culture of concealment, enforced from the top, kept regulators, journalists, and even board members in the dark. Manufactured proof, including fake endorsements, phantom deployments, and legal threats, replaced real scientific validation. For years, these fabrications shielded Theranos from scrutiny, allowing the fraud to grow unchecked. A mother receives a negative HIV result and leaves the clinic relieved, only to learn months later that her infection was missed. A cancer patient delays treatment after a Theranos test reports normal markers, while the disease quietly advances. These are not isolated mistakes. They are the lived consequences of a technology that never worked as promised. In Walgreens stores across California and Arizona, nearly 100,000 finger prick blood draws were performed under the Theranos brand. Patients lined up at retail counters, trusting that a single drop would reveal the truth about their health. Instead, more than 70% of those samples were quietly shipped out the back door to conventional labs, while customers were told their results came from the revolutionary Edison device. The harm was not just theoretical. 4 confirmed false negative HIV results are documented in federal complaints. 2 families filed lawsuits after Theranos tests delayed cancer diagnoses, robbing them of precious time. Pregnancy tests produced both false positives and false negatives, triggering unnecessary procedures and, in some cases, missed prenatal care. Doctors struggled to reconcile inexplicable results with their clinical judgment, sometimes ordering repeat tests at their own expense to protect their patients. The Walgreens pilot alone touched tens of thousands of lives, turning everyday errands into a roll of the dice. For every glowing press release and billion-dollar headline, there were real people left with dangerous misinformation, some who learned the truth too late. Adam Rosendorf, the laboratory director who signed off on Theranos test results, reached his breaking point in 2014. He resigned, then filed a formal complaint with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, warning that patient safety was at risk. His resignation letter spelled out the truth. Data was being manipulated, and the company was ignoring basic lab standards. Inside the company, fear replaced curiosity. Whistleblowers like Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz faced a gauntlet of threats. Schultz, the grandson of board member George Schultz, leaked documents and internal emails to the Wall Street Journal. Erica Chung provided lab logs and first-hand testimony, later appearing before Congress to describe the pressure to keep silent. Theranos responded with a playbook of intimidation. Cease and desist letters landed on doorsteps. Private investigators tracked former employees, sometimes waiting outside their homes. Internal memos described surveillance contracts and even suggested buying one-way tickets to Mexico for departing staff, hoping to keep them quiet. In June 2015, Chung and Schultz handed over critical data to federal investigators, breaking open the wall of secrecy. These insiders risked their careers, reputations, and personal safety, not just to expose a fraud, but to protect the patients whose lives hung in the balance. Their courage forced regulators and journalists to finally look past the myth and see the evidence for what it was. On January 3, 2022, a federal jury found Elizabeth Holmes guilty on 4 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy, each linked to misleading investors who had entrusted Theranos with hundreds of millions. She was acquitted of 3 patient-related charges, but the evidence of investor deception, doctored reports, whistleblower accounts, and over 200 exhibits left little doubt. Sentencing followed on November 18, 2022. Judge Edward Davila imposed 11 years and 3 months in prison, plus supervised release. Holmes began her sentence at the federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, on May 30, 2023. Her appeal was denied in February 2025, the Ninth Circuit upholding both conviction and restitution. The financial consequences were severe. Holmes and Sunny Balwani were ordered to pay $452 million in restitution, with $125 million directed to Rupert Murdoch's family trust. Walgreens, once Theranos' most prominent partner, settled for $140 million to support patient testing and new oversight. The shock rippled outward. Public trust in new medical devices dropped by 15%, venture capital valuations for diagnostic startups fell, and federal agencies imposed stricter validation rules. The Theranos verdict marked a turning point, as regulators and investors demanded evidence over charisma, and the cost of misplaced trust became a warning to the entire industry. Today, medical startups raise billions on promises and charisma, yet the Edison's empty shell and forged endorsements echo through every pitch. When hype outruns evidence, patients, not just investors, pay the price. The next fraud is already hunting for blind faith. If this story of deception and greed shocked you, subscribe to MogulFlix. We expose the people behind the world's biggest financial crimes every single week. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one.